Welcome to Pioneer Mindset, a place where we challenge our mindset and address the discomfort in both business and life by finding clarity resulting in bold conviction. I'm your host, Garrett Ruskamp, fifth generation farmer, husband, and father from rural Nebraska. Whether you're navigating frustration from past decisions or worry about the uncertainty you face today in your business, we're going to learn from our struggles and take on new challenges with a resilient mindset. Join me as I share my journey of struggles I've faced in agriculture as a farmer and family man. I'm ready to dive into honest conversations to tackle the mindsets surrounding key issues that rural ag business owners face that will ultimately help you gain control, leading to a profitable and sustainable business. Let's adapt to Pioneer Mindset and get to it. Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of Pioneer Mindset. If you ever went fishing, do you think that there's actually some lessons a guy can learn there from a business aspect, from a life aspect? I know that's pretty serious and pretty heavy for a topic around fishing, but that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So a little bit of context about where this is actually coming from. This last weekend, I took the wife and kids out to my wife's family. She's got a grandma that lives out in Gothenburg, which is 4 hours west of here. And so we've made this trip a number of times, but this time we stayed an extra day, had a little bit more fun around it, and just kind of made it a little bit of staycation, if you will. Kind of stayed in the same state, kept it really simple. The kids had a great time. One of the things that we did when we were out there was we went fishing. As we were fishing, it was a really good time, but I was just kind of thinking about some different things that really correlate to either business or life. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. The one thing when it comes about fishing, I want to set straight right off the bat, I am not a master angler. So when it comes to fishing, maybe some guys, maybe you grew up fishing with your dad or your grandpa or an uncle or somebody like that. That was not the case for me. My dad really was never a big fisherman, mostly because his dad wasn't a big fisherman, right? So don't necessarily have those memories with my dad or grandpa doing a lot of fishing, or even an uncle for that matter. So really in my childhood, if I had to guess, I could probably count the number of times that I went fishing on one hand. Just very rarely did we actually go fishing. So when I grew up, I didn't have the patience for it, just never really got used to it. It wasn't until I started dating my now wife and got into kind of her family where her dad does a little bit more fishing that I kind of got a little bit more exposure to it. But then furthermore, once we had kids, that's when it was really, okay, let's do something fun. Let's do something, simple and that the kids can get a lot of enjoyment from. And that's when we really started kind of doing more fishing, especially with our oldest. He really took an interest in it. And then it's kind of one of those things when you've got kids that once the oldest takes interest into something, well, the others tend to as well. And so we went fishing, and we usually try to go maybe a handful of times throughout the summer and throughout the year. And it was the case when we were out there in Gothenburg. We actually went about 5 times at the local kind of town park pond, if you will, good size kind of like lake or pond there. But anyways, had a really good time and we had a really good luck. Wanted to kind of reflect on that a little bit. And I put together 8 insightful lessons that I think a guy can learn and correlate back to life and back to business. Not going to spend a ton of time on each one, but I think there's a lot that a guy can kind of take away from this. And by the way, if you kind of turned it down once I started talking about fishing, if that's not your thing, like I said, I completely agree. That's not necessarily always my thing either, but I can definitely find enjoyment in going fishing with the boys. And so this can also be correlated back to maybe hunting or any sort of other hobby that you might have. So stick with me here because there's a lot of kind of life lessons or even especially business lessons that we're really going to kind of touch on. So diving into lesson number 1, you can't catch a fish if you don't cast a line. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but it's also like, hey, we can't catch a fish. We don't have that enjoyment of reeling a fish in when the kids are screaming as soon as they've got a bite and they've actually hooked one, screaming so that way the people at the other side of the lake actually hear them. You don't have that success. You don't have that perfect moment of taking a picture with them with their fish after they've reeled it in, after they've caught it. You don't have that if you don't first cast out that line. It's the same thing with anything else in life. You can't have success if you don't just start, if you don't go do the thing. It's so simple, but it's also worth stating because how many times do we have some sort of fear around it, right? Oh, the weather's not perfect, or it's not a great day to go fishing, or I've got other things I've got to do. I don't have time to do this thing right now. It's the same thing in life, same thing in trying it, maybe a new business adventure. Maybe it's the same thing in just anything that comes up for you right now, whatever you're in right now, whatever season you're in, whatever you're trying to maybe do or start. We can't catch that fish if we do not cast that line. I think that's really where a guy needs to start because it's so important and we overlook that. It's so simple that we sometimes overlook that as well. How many times did we pump the brakes on something because we just don't have the time or we don't do enough of the things that we maybe enjoy even because we don't have the time, right? So that's the first lesson number one. You can't catch a fish if you don't cast a line. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Number two, you don't need the perfect equipment. Or I should say, maybe ask this as a question. Do you need the perfect equipment to go fishing? Oftentimes we feel like we need to have the right tools or the right equipment, and that definitely helps. If you're trying to go fishing for a specific fish, having the right lure, having the right pole, maybe and one of those things where just having the right equipment helps. Maybe if you catch a fish, maybe you need a set of pliers to take it out, or maybe you need a knife to cut the line, or maybe things like that. They definitely help. And I'd say in some cases, the right equipment is extremely important. So you do need sometimes the right equipment, but how much do we put an emphasis on having the perfect equipment or maybe having new equipment, having the tools that we need? And maybe even once again, kind of going back to the first one, we don't start until we have those things in place or we feel like we need to have the newest and the nicest things. I tell you what, the fish don't care if the hook that they're biting is brand new or if it's been used by 10, 12 times already, or if it's been on there for 10 years. As long as it's got a worm on it, the fish are going to bite it, right? So there's things like that even reeling in a big fish, you don't need to have the newest pool to do so. You just need to have something that works. You just need to have something that gets you what you're trying to accomplish, right? You just need to have something that's going to help you get you where you're going. So do you need the perfect equipment? No, you don't. But you do need to have some of the right tools to get us to where we're trying to go. That kind of comes back to the basics there, right? It's pretty simple, but it's oftentimes overlooked, whether it be in business. Maybe it's just having the right tools in place to manage the finances or to make good decisions on the farm or to manage the business side of things, right? Whether it's retail or whether it's production agriculture, doesn't matter. Just having the right tools and equipment in place, but we don't necessarily need to have the perfect ones. And once again, if we get so caught up in having the perfect ones or the new ones or the right ones, we may not get started at all because we're not to that point. Oftentimes, once you get started, you realize, okay, this works, but we could maybe update things here or there. Or if I also kind of go back to this kind of idea we have in our head sometimes that this is what we need. And then once you get into it, you find out we don't need this at all. From a life perspective, kind of correlate this back to life, I'm going to actually give the reference here of sometimes the more kids you have, the less that you find out you actually need it. And that's the same thing for maybe other areas of business as well. But from parenting aspect, when you have a newborn or the first one, maybe you got one kid, you feel like you need all this stuff. You need all these things, especially you go on vacation. You literally pack the kitchen sink. That way you have everything that you need. And you would think that as you have more kids, I should say, that you need more things or you need all these things. Well, as you go through life, as you're parenting, you find that you actually need less, or maybe there's certain things that you actually need that you thought that you didn't think you needed before, or vice versa. Or maybe we get all this stuff as a newborn parent and we don't need half of it, or we need some different things. So that's one kind of another lesson there. Lesson number two is, do you need the perfect equipment? Number three, the right time and place is important, but can also be very distracting. All right, so here too, if you've ever gone fishing, this was great as I was not only fishing myself, but I feel like the lessons really come in when you're helping other people and you're watching other people, especially the kids, right? And kids are so innocent, they're so human nature and so unfiltered, if you will. There's so many lessons to be pulled out just by parenting kids and being around kids. And so in this instance, I remember my oldest son, probably pretty impatient when he's fishing and always wanting to, okay, this isn't the right place. Let's reel it in and cast out over here. Might be out in kind of the middle of a peninsula and just literally going around a horseshoe, just trying to find the perfect place to catch a fish. But in the meantime, not necessarily having the patience to just sit there and wait. And so, might cast it out, wait a few minutes. This isn't perfect. Reel it in, try it over here. Or then even back to the perfect equipment, because these two kind of tie back and forth, right? Maybe we need a different lure. This one's not catching. We need a different hook. We need a different bobber. We need something different here. I need to use a different pole. I need to use a bigger pole. Different things like that. So I took the three older ones, just for context. Took the three older ones. So the ages are 8, 6, and 4. The younger two would kind of use some smaller, really kids fishing pools. My oldest would use kind of a bigger pool there. The younger two, maybe there was one that was always catching the fish with a certain pole. They're like, well, I need to use that pole. That pole is going to help me catch more fish. But then we also realized that that's not the case. That might just be the luck at the time. So back to that, the right timing and the right place can be really important, but it's also very distracting. And when I say the right timing, in this instance, when we're talking about fishing, maybe it's the time of day. And that's one thing we did learn. And as we went fishing, usually in the morning and the evening. It was a little bit hotter at times when we were out there, so we went in the morning and the evening. Had pretty good luck both times. In the evening, there was a lot more people out. In the mornings, the couple times we went, there was hardly anybody out. And so we feel like we actually had better luck in the mornings. That's something that you learn. You learn that as you go, and you don't learn that until you get out to actually start trying things. But that can also be distracting. And that back to the right time and place, we put so much emphasis on that. Back to the business side, correlating that back to this is maybe we just think, well, right now is not the perfect timing. I'm just going to wait. Well, once again, you can't catch that fish if you don't cast a line. Back to that first lesson. Same thing here. It's really important that we don't just kind of spend too much time chasing these things as well, chasing the perfect timing, chasing the perfect place, because this is also goes back to shiny object syndrome. We're always getting distracted by something that we think is better or newer, or going to get us that success a lot quicker and easier. Well, that's really not the case. So while if we would just cast it in and we just leave it be, we sit there, be patient, that's when also we might find that we're going to have that success exactly where we started. Instead of just getting bored, instead of reeling that back in and trying somewhere else, or maybe in a different marketplace, maybe a different area of the business, maybe just trying all these different ideas because we think that's where the hot ticket's going to be. A lot of this really kind of comes down to just being patient, but then also continuing that learning process as well. Because I mentioned that before. Yeah, there might be a right time and right place, but we ultimately don't know that until we get into things. We don't necessarily know where the right time and place to fish is until we start fishing, until we start the business, until we start getting into it and learning and failing and succeeding and seeing some sort of success, right? So this all really kind of comes down to being patient and being willing to learn as we go and not necessarily have that shiny object syndrome. So we're constantly casting out somewhere else. Now, on the side note there, when it comes to the right time and place, there is a lot we actually found as I was fishing. So the first 2 times we went fishing, it was just me and the boys. And then the other 3 times that we went out, my father-in-law was around. And so he's fished this lake many, many times. And so he's like, well, I really like this spot over here. And so we went over there a few times and we did actually have better luck. So there too, again, be willing to, in that instance, be willing to maybe take some advice from somebody else. Not saying you have to take his word. Maybe that's just at the time that he had success at that point in time. All right. So you could read into this multiple different ways. But I think the big thing here with the lesson number 3 is just the right time and right place is important, but it can also be very distracting. So lesson number 4, passion doesn't equal success, but it can equal resilience. So thinking in the form of passion, those that are really passionate around fishing, since we're talking about fishing, right, are just willing to go out consistently in whether it be the right conditions or not, whether they have the right equipment or not, and not just maybe not even the perfect place, just those that are willing to go out and try it consistently. Those are usually the ones that build in the most resilience and going to, in the long term, probably have the most success. They're going to be able to kind of work through that a lot easier. So it's a lot easier to work harder in an area that you are passionate about. And so that's where I think this equates back to business. If you truly love fishing, if you just truly have a passion about it, it's kind of back to that phrase that everybody talks about is a bad day fishing is still better than a good day at the office. If you're truly passionate about, say, farming, well, even a bad year of farming is still going to be better than, well, maybe a good year of working for somebody else, if that's the case, or a good year doing something else. That passion doesn't necessarily equal success, but it can equal resilience. And when you have that passion, we're willing to do what it takes. We're willing to work hard. And that's what can really build in that resilience. Okay, so I think passion is extremely important because it's really hard for us to find success in anything that we do without that passion. Because in anything that we do, whether you believe it or not, there are going to be trials, there are going to be hardships, there's always going to be something that you have to face. It may not seem like it at the beginning, but there's always going to be something that you have to face. And that passion is what can help carry you through those hardships. Okay, remembering that passion and not losing sight of that, not letting that flame burn out as soon as we get this wind of hardships is what I'm trying to say, to blow out that flame, if you will. The passion is what's going to keep us resilient, and that's what's going to keep us in the game. So that can be extremely important. So I noticed that, when it comes to the fishing side of things, those that just truly love it, that are willing to do it day in and day out, or like just get after it, those are the ones that typically do find the most success and are able to get through those hardships and build in that resilience. So, number 5 here, you're not always going to catch something. And this goes back to what we just talked about, trying to build in that resilience. Okay, those that go out all the time do not always catch something. That's life. You're not always going to catch something. That's life. You're not always going to have the success that you dream of, that you think is going to come so easy, but we both know is going to be hard. We were fortunate that every time that we went out, we did catch something. But I can tell you from my own personal experience back to my childhood, part of why I did not like fishing is because there maybe was a couple times where I went fishing where I didn't catch a damn thing. And I tell you what, that's not very fun. And it's hard for me to want to continue to go back out, especially if you don't have the passion, by the way. It's hard for us to continue to go back out, continue to cast that line when you have this doubt in your mind that you're never going to catch anything. When you haven't caught anything in the past, you haven't saw that success, you haven't reeled in that fish and had that enjoyment, that kid screaming at the top of his lungs that, I caught a fish, I caught a fish. And you can hear them across the lake and they're so excited. When you haven't had that moment, it's hard to continue on. But that's also life. There's going to be days, if you fish enough, if you cast out enough lines, if you show up enough to your business, if you show up enough in life, there's going to be days that you don't have success and you don't catch anything. And that's life. That is life. And just an understatement, by the way, and it's pretty easy to throw that out there. Well, it's easy for you to say that's life because maybe you haven't had these hardships. Well, at the end of the day, you can either accept the fact that life is going to have hardships, or you can just be blindsided by the reality of the hardships that always keep coming your way. That's kind of the reality of it. Okay. So, yeah, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to say that's life because it is. We're always going to be faced with hardships. We're not always going to have success, even if we cast out that line. But back to what I was saying before, if we consistently do that, eventually we will find some sort of success. So that's number 5. You're not always going to catch something. And this is also, by the way, something that I tried to repeat to the kids. When we were fishing all the time, there was, I think, one day where one of them didn't catch something. And he was pretty disappointed. He was pretty set on just let's keep going until we catch something. We're just gonna stay out here. The sun went down, but we still got some daylight. Let's just keep working at it. Let's do our best to catch something. And at the end of the day, he didn't. He didn't catch anything. That was the youngest one. And so he's pretty sad, pretty bummed, right? I didn't catch a fish. The next day he came back and he caught 3 of them. He caught more than his brothers did. And so I'm going to actually skip ahead here because I think it kind of coincides with that as well, is those that stay in it the longest tend to have the most success. And I just kind of mentioned that before. All right. So I'm actually skipping ahead here, kind of going out of order. I was going to keep this one at the end, but since we're talking about it and with this scenario of kind of the youngest son here did not catch anything. He went out, didn't catch anything. That's life. That happens. Came back the next day. He caught 3 fish, caught more than what his brothers did. So those that are willing to cast out the line the most, log the most hours, are generally going to catch the most fish, are generally going to have the most success. It's all about surviving the long haul. We can't have this success if we don't continue to survive. And sometimes the hardships in business and life and farming, especially those that are facing those hardships right now, sometimes it's about surviving. And I know we always want to thrive all the time. We just want to make sure that we can constantly thrive. But let's face it, back to like what I just said before, life's going to happen. You're not always going to catch something. You're not always going to thrive. Sometimes it is just about surviving so you can get to that next day, so you can go back to fish, so you can get back to actually thriving and succeeding. But we can't do that if we don't just continue to stay in it and continue to survive the long haul. So those that stay in it the longest, those that cast out the most lines, log the most hours, are generally going to catch the most fish. That was supposed to be number 8. I'm going to put that in as number 6 right now. So let's go to number 7. So the next one here is dealing with a tangled line, aka problem solving. So going back to that resilience, in order to build in that resilience, you're going to have to problem solve. You're going to have to kind of get through these problems as they come. One of those being when it comes to fishing is a tangled line. So dealing with that problem as it comes. So I can't remember what day it was, but we were fishing and I was with the father-in-law. So he was kind of helping him. And, all of a sudden, maybe one of the boys had a tangled line. So I'll go ahead and fix this. And then I had another one. So we had 2 poles that were tangled lines. And one thing when it comes to fishing line is I really could have easily just pulled it out, pulled the tangled mess out, and just cut it, walked away from that mess, and then fixed it up as is, right? And I thought about doing that many times. But at the end of the day, this was as I was kind of thinking about all these different lessons, by the way. And so I'm like, man, this is just a problem that comes our way. That's always going to come our way, whether we're fishing, doing something fun, doing something we really are passionate about, or whether it's in business and life, we're always going to have these problems. Yeah, it should be a hell of a lot easier just to cut our losses and start over. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I want to figure this out. And I tell you what, folks, there's nothing to me that's more tedious and that I hate more than trying to untangle something, especially fishing line. If you've ever had to untangle a fishing line before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You would think that stuff would be easy to work with. It is not. One, it's hard to see, and you don't know where it's going because it's so small, right? And it's just hard to figure out. But anyways, I was so committed to trying to get this untangled because I want to be a problem solver. I want to be able to solve problems as they come my way. And by golly, it took me 15 minutes for that, probably each pull, but I did get them untangled. I got the hook back on, I put some weight back on, and we were good to go for the next time that we went fishing. Even if we didn't need it that day, even if the opportunity passed up that day, we were ready to go for next time. We solved the problem as it comes. And that's all about really just kind of staying patient and keeping at it and being resilient, being willing to get through those hard times. And also, it's a really easy, once again, if you're not passionate about that thing that you're in, whenever that problem comes up, it's really easy for us to say, well, screw this. All right, I'm not going to do this anymore. I don't want to deal with this problem. We're just going to cut our losses and not mess with them. Maybe we throw the entire pull away. That's really easy for that thought process, that thought to kind of pop up, right? But if you're passionate about what you're doing, if you're in it for the long haul, if you're willing to do what it takes to solve the problems when they come up, that's when you become resilient. That's when you build in that resilience. And so that's kind of number 7 there, right? Is dealing with the tangled line and problem solving. So the last one here, a lot of these just kind of coincide back and forth, right? The last one here is going to actually be watching your own bobber. And I really, really love this one. So watching your own bobber, I actually heard this phrase from a friend of mine, kind of became friends, I guess, in one of the groups that we were kind of a part of. But I always remember this guy talking about this phrase is watch your own bobber. And if you're not a fisher, this may not necessarily make sense to you. But typically for most of us that have been fishing at some point in our lives, maybe especially even as a kid using a bobber, you can see your bobber over there, but then all of a sudden maybe you're fishing with your buddy and he's to the right of you. And you're maybe watching his bobber because, damn, he just got a bite. His bobber went under. And man, he's reeling one in. And you're sitting there and you're watching his bobber and he's reeling one in. Maybe he's reeling another one in. Maybe he's caught 3 fish already and you haven't caught anything. But maybe you didn't even realize that you've had some nibbles. You've had some bites. Your worm's actually gone because you weren't watching your own bobber. So I really love this one. This is so good. And for anything that we do, whether it be business or fishing or life, we get so distracted by somebody else's success that we forget to acknowledge our own. That's about kind of watching the grass. Think about the grass that's greener on the other side of the fence, or just watching somebody else have success in an area that you're in that you still might be passionate about, by the way, but we're too busy focused on somebody else's success that we realize we don't acknowledge our own. We don't even focus on our own self. Okay, we're always focused on somebody else, always focused on maybe even on somebody else's opinions of us. And so we're always just distracted. We're not focusing on the things that we've done well. We're focusing on maybe the negative things or maybe just everything that's not going our way. We're so distracted because we're watching somebody else's bobber. We're watching somebody else's life pass by and we're too fixated on that to even enjoy our own life. And if we're constantly comparing our life to somebody else's, do you think that you're going to find any enjoyment in your own? No. So watch your own bobber. So that's really, as we're going to kind of round out these different lessons here, that's number 8. It's kind of the last one I'm going to mention, but it really kind of coincides with everything we talked about. So I want to add a bonus one in here really quick. It's not necessarily even worth naming or giving a number, but as we are fishing, as we're kind of going through all this, and as we've maybe been through some of these different areas, maybe you've been around the block a few times through business, maybe everything that we talked about, you're nodding your head, be like, yep, I remember that, or I understand that you got to be passionate in order to build in the resilience. But as we were fishing, and as I'm fishing with the boys, and I'm sitting there and I'm helping them do the best that I can. I'm baiting their hooks and I'm putting them out there, showing them how to do things, and they're learning as we go. You get all three of them that are able to, put the worm on the hook by themselves, cast out the lines by themselves, don't necessarily need as much help, which makes it a lot easier for me to get back to fishing. But there might be times where, okay, maybe they snagged it, pulled off the hook, pulled off the weights, bring it to me. Well, I'll do my best to kind of help you out. And then it's just a constant reminder that, hey, let's just stay patient. Let's enjoy it. Or back to, watching your own bobber. Hey, watch your own bobber so that we're not watching your brother's, and don't fixate on the fish that he's caught. Focus on what you're doing. And so all these different things that we've mentioned about, all these different lessons, if you will, we get to a point where I would say we get to like the coach or the guide phase. So in this case, maybe it's me or even the story that back to fishing when my father-in-law was around and he was helping us out. And it was really helpful because then you had two kind of adults to maybe help fix the lines or, if they needed help baiting the hooks or different things like that, right? And so the last day that he actually went fishing with them, I took the youngest son to the playground, which is kind of in the same area. But it was funny because he said he was laughing because he said he didn't get any real fishing done because he was helping everybody else. So my oldest son, he was kind of the last one to kind of quit fishing, if you will, that day. He had caught about 4 fish that day. That last morning, he was having a good time, and he told Grandpa. He said, "Hey, Grandpa, I think it's about time to quit." And Grandpa laughed because he's like, "Well, I haven't even fished yet because it's been so busy helping you guys take the fish off of your hooks and helping them bait their lines and fixing their lines and all this stuff." And he just laughed because he was so busy helping them that he never got a chance to actually fish. And so at some point, we get to that season to where we are now like the coach or the guide. We maybe lived these things a little bit, or we've had some experience in these different areas. And so we become that person that maybe you live through others' success. There's even days where I didn't catch a fish, but I still had a great time because I was able to see others, the boys, have fun and see their success. And that was good enough. And that was success to me. Oftentimes, you become better at also helping others. And so, like, in this instance, I recall back to my father-in-law, he was saying that, okay, I took all the boys to the playground for a little bit and I took them back and he kept fishing because, really didn't get a chance. And so sometimes by actually going through that and being that coach and that guide, you get better at what you're doing as well. So there's a lot of things that we can learn from being in that phase while we're still in it, but we're also helping other people. We're also helping other people work through these different lessons that we just talked about, especially our kids, especially those around us, especially somebody that's kind of been through certain circumstances. I just kind of bring that up because it's really interesting that he was saying that. He was like, well, Grandpa, I think we should call it a day. I've caught quite a few. And Grandpa's like, I haven't even fished yet. I haven't even caught anything. And so it was just funny, but it was a good time. As we kind of get to rounding this out, I'm going to recap really, really quickly on these different lessons. And I think they really tie back to lots of areas of business and life. So the first one, you can't catch a fish if you don't cast out a line. Second one is, do you need the perfect equipment? Yes or no? And third one is, the right time and place is important, but can also be very distracting. Number 4, passion doesn't equal success, but it can equal resilience. All right, number 5, you're not always going to catch something. Number 6, which I jumped ahead. So those that cast the most lines, log the most hours, are generally going to catch the most fish. So we're going to go to number 7, dealing with the tangled line, aka problem solving, and be willing to be a problem solver. Number 8, watch your own bobber. All right. So I hope that there was some value in this, something that's useful for you, something that you related to. Maybe there's some other lesson that you've learned while you were out fishing and you'd like to relay that on. I'd love to hear that. Maybe it's something else that you've learned that ties back to business. And so this is all just kind of how can we really frame up this mindset to adapt some of these different things, remind ourselves of these things while we're in the moment, while we are out fishing, while we're out in the middle of the business, in the middle of the busy season, while we're out in the thick of things and when life is handing us hardships and we haven't caught anything and we've been out there day after day, day after day. This is just that reminder that we need to keep on keeping on. We need to keep pushing, and that there's a reason that you are where you are right now. All right. So hope there was some value that you caught from this week's episode. We'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for tagging along with me today as we sharpened our mindsets. If you've gained insight from today's episode, be sure to take a screenshot to share or send this episode to somebody who might also find value in it. For more, follow me on Instagram @GarrettRuskamp
or on Facebook, and join me next time for more Conviction Through Clarity.